Hello and welcome back to the Training Tom podcast, the place where I share how I am training myself to navigate through life. And in today's episode, we're talking about celebrating your successes. So let's get into it. After recent episodes, I thought it was a good idea to try and change up the narrative a little bit. The past few episodes have been a lot about me sharing my challenges, and I know that it's resonated with a few people, so it's really good to see and really good to hear as well. But also, I'm very conscious that I want to try and create quite a positive community and quite positive messaging in the episodes as well. So I want to try and make sure that I'm getting the balance right. And in today's episode, I want to share a little bit more about a positive side of things, how we can start celebrating our own successes. And this episode actually was born or came to me this morning. I was looking through my daily Stoic, which is on my bedside table, and it was talking about how you can let certain thoughts into your mind. And I thought about, the podcast and the episode that I wanted to record for this week. And in all fairness, there have been some things that I've thought about recording for this week's episode. But this, because of reading that passage in the Daily Stoic this morning, I felt was very appropriate for A, the time of year that we're in, and B, to come off the back of the episodes that we've had over the past couple of weeks. So I want to touch on that first point first to start off with. And that the time of year that we're in, we are now 3 months into the year. 3 months and a week. And that's a really exciting place to be, but it also highlights to me how quickly 2025 is flashing past our eyes already. And it's, crazy to think that we're at this point already. But it's a great opportunity for reflection. And as you'll know from listening to this podcast if you've only just joined, you might not know, but if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while now, you will know that a lot of my episodes are born out of reflection and is something that I try to practice quite regularly, whether that's through journaling, whether that's through making notes on my phone, or whether that's just through sharing my thoughts on the podcast, or talking to friends as well. And I consider myself to be quite a reflective person. Maybe that is born from my overthinking mindset or the way that I've been molded. But I reflect quite a lot, or I have been, especially over the past few years. And that means that when I get to perhaps a milestone, like we are at the moment, just over 3 months into the year, it reminds me that it's a good opportunity to reflect. And one of the reflections that I had this morning when I was reading through the Daily Stoic was thinking about how I can try and create a positive environment in my mind. And one of the ways that we can create a positive environment in our mind is by celebrating our successes. And I'm not saying that, we need to wait for big successes, like if you're at university at the moment, not waiting for an exam result or waiting for your final degree result to come through. I am referencing those things, but I'm also talking about the small things that happen day to day as well. So that's what I want to try and touch on in this episode. And I want to give you some examples from this year that I consider to be successes for me, and also how I came to that conclusion of it being a success too. But before I do that, I actually want to start off by saying that, as you might have gathered from the past couple of episodes on perfectionism and on why I'm kind of overthinking everything, I've actually struggled to receive praise and to recognize successes that I've had in the past. If I'm truly honest, it makes me feel quite uncomfortable when people do praise me and when they do highlight successes, or even when I recognise that maybe I've done something well or I've done something good and I've had a success. I found it really challenging in the past. And I think that is related to some of the things that I've spoken about in previous episodes around mental health, the belief that I hold about myself, the perfectionism being one of them, the overthinking comes into it as well. But also in the past, I guess, not having the confidence to recognize those successes too. Often when I am given a bit of praise, or I do recognize my successes, I don't really know how to react, especially in that instance where somebody gives me praise. And I think this is perhaps a universal British thing more than anything, is that we don't like to stand out. We don't like to be seen as anything different. So if we get given praise, it does make us stand out. It does isolate us perhaps a little bit. And yeah, it feels quite uncomfortable. Like I say, I don't know how to react. So a lot of the time I will give praise back to the person that has given me praise so that we both feel good. So it's not just one person that feels good and feels all happy. Like I try to return that favor almost, because I feel like somebody is doing me a favor by giving me some praise. But one thing I've tried to learn over the past couple of years is to start accepting that praise or accepting that recognition that somebody is giving me. Simply saying thank you to that person, because actually what we don't realize, and I didn't realize this for a long period of time, is that I don't have to give somebody praise in return for the praise that they've given me to make them feel good. Actually, sometimes that person is giving you praise because they want to recognize what you've done, but it also makes them feel good to recognize other people's successes too. So that's something that I've tried to kind of learn, and I'm still learning about it now. I still feel uncomfortable when people praise me, especially at work, or, people thank me for sharing things on the podcast. I still, find it challenging, I guess. It's still something that I'm learning to cope with, to accept. Yeah, something that I'm still learning to accept is that praise and that recognition that people give you. But I also think it relates to that growth mindset, in that if it's something that I feel uncomfortable receiving, if praise is something I feel uncomfortable receiving, then I need to embrace that. I need to embrace that discomfort, and I need to recognize and learn why I find it uncomfortable, because ultimately that is what growth mindset is all about. It's about learning from uncomfortable situations. It's about embracing discomfort at every opportunity. So if I find receiving praise uncomfortable, then that is an opportunity to learn. That is an opportunity to understand myself better. So I need to embrace those situations a lot more. Now, historically, I think I've also had a hard time recognizing my own successes. Linking back to that perfectionism episode, I'm always looking for more, looking for better. Nothing's ever perfect, so I don't recognize those good moments, those successes that I have had. I'm always thinking, how can I do things better? Which I think in some instances is a good thing, but in a lot of respects is not a healthy behavior to have, because you're never truly satisfied. And perhaps you're never truly grateful for the situation that you find yourself in. And it comes back to that Mexican fisherman story, where you're constantly striving for more, but actually the place that you're in at this moment in time might be the place that you want to get to anyway. Or it comes back to things that I've mentioned from other podcasts that I've listened to, where you have a goal. Once you have achieved that goal, you set yourself a new goal, but you said that you'd be happy when you achieved your last goal. So recognizing that is an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn, and actually recognizing that historically I haven't reflected on the successes that I have had and celebrated those successes means that I've never perhaps been truly grateful for where I am, or never allowed myself to be truly present in the situation that I'm in, because I'm looking for that next step. I'm looking for things to be better, when actually a lot of the time I said that I would be happy, or I said that I would be content when I achieved the thing that I'd achieved. A prime example that comes to mind is that I thought I would be happy when I achieved a first in my degree. And I achieved the first in my degree and I thought, is that it? I thought there'd be something more. I thought there would be this grand awakening almost of, wow, I've achieved a first and all of a sudden all of these doors are going to open for me, which simply wasn't the case. So I didn't truly celebrate the success of achieving the grade that I did in my degree because, I just wasn't in the place where I could recognize that as being a huge success and all of the time, the effort and the work that went into that as well. Now, another thing that I want to say at the start of this episode is that by sharing some of the successes that I've had at the start of this year, I don't want this to just be me simply, I guess, spouting how great I am. I don't want this to be the word that I've got in my notes is or the phrase that I've got in my notes is an adulation crusade, where I want everybody to recognize how great I am and think about all of the amazing things that I've been able to achieve this year, because that's simply not the case. I'm sharing these things in the hope that you recognize how you can find the successes you've had so far this year. Because some of the things that I'm going to share are what you might consider to be quite big things. Other things might actually be quite simple and quite small things. And I've got 3 things that I want to share, and I think they do quite nicely spread across that spectrum of being something small and then something a bit bigger as well. So, by sharing the successes that I've had, I hope this episode allows you to take some time to reflect on what you've done this year so far, the things that you could, or the areas in your life that you could find success, and to recognize those things, to celebrate those things, because ultimately, if we don't celebrate our own successes, who is going to celebrate them for us? Maybe you do have a partner, or maybe you do have a great friendship group that will celebrate those successes with you. But often it's those smaller things that people don't recognize so readily that have the biggest impact on us as an individual. So I'm going to start things off with one of those small things that I think has had a big impact on me as an individual, but that people wouldn't recognize because they simply don't see this in my day-to-day life. And that is that I've been journaling consistently ever since the start of the year. I shared this in another episode, I received a journal for Christmas, and I kind of set myself the goal, or I set myself the ambition to just write something in there every morning and every evening once I've woken up and before I go to bed, so that I can just reflect on the day. And I also have a log of different thoughts and also different experiences that I've been exposed to throughout the day. And I've also heard that journaling was very useful for your mental health, for creating a positive environment in your mind. So I wanted to try that, and I've tried journaling before in the past and not been able to make it a consistent habit. Well, I wanted to make it a consistent habit this year. And the reason I've highlighted it as a success is because, bar a few days, I have been very consistent with journaling. Some days I have only journaled in the morning, some days I've only journaled in the evening, but I would say that for 98% of the days of this year so far, I have written something in that journal. Some days it has simply been a sentence or a small paragraph that simply said, today was a busy day, I'm really tired, I want to get a good night's sleep. Other times I have written pages and pages of information in there. And the reason that I recognised this as a success was because this morning, when I was journaling, after I'd read my page in the Daily Stoic, I realised just how much I had written into that journal. To give you an idea, I am well over 50% of the way through that notebook. I would say I'm probably, if I look at it now, maybe 60 to 65% of the way through that notebook. And we're only 25% through the year. So as you can see, or as you can hear, I've recognised that by creating this habit of writing in that journal every single day, I was expecting this journal to perhaps last me 6 months or last me a year. In fact, it might only last me 4 or 5 months because I've made that habit and I've been consistent with it. But also within myself, I've noticed that getting my thoughts down on paper has been a really useful exercise to sometimes remove myself from the situation that I find myself in. And that's been a great help for my mental health. It's also been a great help for me as a reflective exercise to be able to look back on some of the challenges that I might have faced, but also and I didn't do this for this episode, it's only just come to mind, to look back on some of the successes that I've had over this year as well. And yeah, perhaps that is something that I should have done before recording this episode, is actually look back through that journal and reflect on some of the things that I've done over the course of this year. And yeah, think about what I've written in there and why I might have written that at that moment in time and the thought processes that might have been going on. So maybe that's another exercise for me to do in the future. So I guess the question for you from that is, think about the small things that you've done on a daily basis over the course of this year so far. And think of the things in particular that have been successful. What have you done that has supported you in achieving your goal? What have you done that has supported you in feeling better within yourself? What things have created a positive environment for you to thrive in? And what are those small things that you've done on a consistent basis, or at least attempted to do on a consistent basis, that you think have had a positive impact on you over the course of this year so far? Now, speaking of reflecting back on things that you have done and using reference points, I guess, the next thing I want to talk about is my training. So those of you that have listened to the podcast for a little while now, or those of you that have been following along on my Instagram page or my Strava account, links for which are in the description of this podcast, you will know that I've been training for an Ironman. I'm training for Ironman Leeds, which is on the 27th of July, and I have about 16 and a half weeks to go until that event. So it is rapidly catching up with me. And the thing that I see as a massive success is the level of training that I've been able to do, in particular over the past 3 to 4 weeks. To give you an example, last week, and I made some notes on this, so kind of coming back to that journal reference where I could have reflected back, I went onto my Strava account and I reflected back on all of the activities that I did last week and the total volumes for all of those activities. And last week I swam 4,400 meters. I cycled over 113 kilometers and I ran over 22 kilometers. And to put that in perspective, in terms of the Ironman, the swim, though that distance of swimming last week would have completed the Ironman, or the Ironman distance and then some. For the bike ride, I would have another 67 kilometers to cycle. And for the run, I would have to double the running volume that I did last week. So at this moment in time, considering I am 16 and a half weeks away, I'm already training on a weekly basis at well over half the distance that I'm meant to be doing, which from a success point of view, if I think back to the start of the year, even at the end of January, I was concerned that my health wouldn't enable me to get to the start line, let alone to finish this Ironman. Now fast forward to the beginning of April, and I look back on those numbers from last week, and it fills me with confidence that the level that I'm training at the moment is putting me in a really good place to not only start that triathlon or start that Ironman, but also to get me to the finish line as well. And it makes me feel really positive that I can get to the finish line and that I will get to the finish line as well. I mentioned in that Ironman reveal episode that if I get to the finish line, when I get to the finish line, well, looking at the data and looking at the statistics from last week, I'm leaning very much towards that when I get to the finish line. The most important thing at the moment for me is getting to the start line, because if I don't get to the start line, I can't get to the finish line. But the numbers that I'm looking at are really encouraging for me. And they're also showing me that when I commit to something, when I put my mind to trying to achieve a goal like that, if I put the commitment in and if I make the time, that's a really important thing as well. If I make the time to commit towards a goal, then I can achieve it. And at this moment in time, I do strongly believe that I can achieve this goal. But I also feel like it has crossover into other areas of my life, because I'm committing to this volume of training. I'm committing to making time for all of this training as well. And if I think of some of the other challenges that I have at the moment in terms of, perhaps socializing, the work commitments that I have, dating somebody new, if I can commit to if I can commit to the training involved to complete an Ironman, then it shows me that I can also commit to those other areas of my life as well. And put the time, make the time, and put the energy into those people, those things, to make sure that I am committed to not the goals that I've set myself necessarily in all of those areas, but committed to those people, committed to the aspirations that I have. So that was another success that I see, is that the amount of training that I'm doing right now is putting me in a really good position, but it's also having a lot of crossover in other areas of my life. So again, to kind of bring this back to you, to give you a reflection task almost, is what success have you had in one area of your life that enables you to be a better person in other areas of your life as well. And thirdly and finally, I want to come to this podcast. I set myself the task and the goal at the start of this year of recording one episode every week. In fact, it wasn't even a goal that I'd set myself. It was a promise that I made to myself and to everybody listening to this podcast, that I would make a podcast episode every single week. And as it stands, I have completed that, or I am completing that promise. I am living up to that promise that I set myself and that I set to you guys too. And to me, that is just as big as any other challenge that I've set myself in the past, because a lot of the time in the past, I have made promises to myself and not kept them. I found an excuse, or I found a way to break that promise, or to convince myself that the promise I had made was not realistic. I think that's the best way of phrasing it. Yeah, the promise that I'd made, or the promises that I've made to myself in the past, I've made excuses, or I've found ways to convince myself that the promise wasn't realistic. And I have to admit, when I promised you and when I promised myself at the start of the year that I would make a podcast or I would release a podcast every week, I was unsure whether that promise was realistic or not. But sometimes, or what I'm coming to realise, and through reflecting on it, what I've come to realise is that sometimes it might be unrealistic, but not giving yourself an alternative option means that you find a way no matter what. If it's unrealistic, but you give yourself alternative options to make it more realistic, you will naturally want to find the easy option. And this, I guess, comes back to that episode that I recorded on choices. I haven't given myself an alternative option. The only option I've given myself is to record an episode every single week. By hook or by crook, I have got an episode out every single week. And sometimes that has meant recording the episode 12 hours before it is meant to be released. Recording it, editing it, or not even editing it, because I don't really edit these episodes. I just talk, put it onto an editing program, add in the music and if you're watching this on video, like the visual aspects at the start and the end. And then I upload it. And that is simply it. There's nothing, I guess, complicated about the editing in inverted commas that I do. But it's still a process. I have to understand what I want to talk about. I have to, or I choose to, make some notes on those things. I record the episode. I upload the episode to that editing software. I make the very small edits, again in inverted commas. I download that episode. I upload that episode to the platforms that I use and that this podcast is available on. And then it's done. And sometimes I listen back to those episodes to understand them a bit more and to, again, reflect on them. But yeah, there's a process involved. And every single week I have made sure that an episode has been released, no matter what. And that's something that I don't say this about myself very often. I'm very proud of the fact that I've been able to do that at the start of this year. And I sincerely hope, well, I'm not going to give myself another option. So I want to maintain that promise to myself. I don't want to give myself an alternative option. But I am proud of myself for the fact that I have managed to do that consistently. And also that the content I'm producing is supporting other people. I think that is the most important thing, because it'd be very easy for me sometimes to just record, not think about how it impacts people and just get content out there, like the time where I recorded an episode 12 hours before it was being released. But I still put a lot of thought and I still put a lot of time and energy into creating content that I think is valuable for people. So yeah, that is something that I consider to be a success. And I guess the takeaway for you listening to this is there something that you've been doing over the course of this year that has been hard, that you have wanted to quit at times, but regardless of how you've been feeling, you've carried on anyway? Because I think that is often overlooked, is the resilience that we show and the resilience that we need in order to achieve a goal, but also the resilience that we need sometimes just to get through day-to-day life. Because life isn't always easy. In fact, life is never easy. There are always things that come up that challenge us. Things don't go to plan. things can derail us from the idea we had in our mind of how we were going to go about things. I realise I've said things a lot there, which is quite ambiguous, but hopefully you understand what I mean, in that there are lots, life isn't easy. To just bring it back to that point, life isn't easy. And a lot of the time, we have to overcome hurdles, we have to overcome challenges, and we have to adapt. We have to adapt every single day to make sure that we can still get everything done that we need. And I feel like that is the caveat to this episode, is that it's easy for me to find these successes at this moment in time because I feel like I'm in a really good place. Yes, I've shared some challenges over the past couple of weeks and I'm still working on those challenges, but generally speaking, I feel like I'm in a really good place. And it's therefore very easy for me to find these successful moments, to find the positives in the things that I've done at the start of this year. It's much harder to do that when you're struggling in any way. I know that from personal experience. When you're struggling, the analogy that I use is there's just a cloud hovering over the top of you. And it's very hard to see the sunshine that is above the cloud. So therefore, it's very difficult to see the positives in the things that you're doing. And I want to say to the person listening to this that might be in that place at the moment, it's okay. It is okay if you're feeling that way, if you're struggling at the moment, because like I said, life is not easy. The other thing to say on that is sometimes simply getting out of bed, managing your personal hygiene and putting food into your belly is the success that you've had that day. It doesn't need to be the grand things that could be considered in this episode. It doesn't need to be recording a podcast. It doesn't need to be training for an ultra endurance event. It doesn't need to be setting yourself a goal and striving towards that goal. Sometimes it is just the daily things that are your success, and they're your big success as well. Getting up out of bed in the morning, having a shower and washing yourself, eating and giving your body energy. Sometimes those things might seem simple to other people, but for you, in that moment in time when you're struggling, they are huge things. Now, annoyingly, my camera turned off because it was overheating, just as I was explaining a little bit there about if you're struggling, what you can do and how to recognise your successes. But in all honesty, I don't think that was a bad thing that the camera turned off because, yeah, I probably was waffling a little bit. In essence, to bring this episode to a close, recognising your own success is something I think that we should all do a lot more often, especially if you are British and you live in Britain. We don't tend to recognise our successes very often. But even more than that, whatever position you're in, whether you're in a good place, whether you're in a bad place, however life is impacting you at the moment, I think an important takeaway is to recognise what success means to you. Because success is going to mean different things to all of us. And if you try to recognise your successes based on what other people's definition of success is, then you might not be able to find your version of success. You might not be able to find the successful things that you do on a daily basis or that you've done so far this year. So I guess the key takeaway at the end of this episode is, regardless of where you're at in life and what you're dealing with at this moment in time, first of all, define what a successful day means to you. Second, define what success, full stop, means to you. And third, reflect on what you have done over the course of this year so far and try to highlight from those definitions that you've created, try to highlight all of the things that you have done that have been a success. Sorry for the little interruption where, like I say, my camera overheated, turned itself off and stopped me mid-flow, but I think that was coming to the close. In fact, I know that that was coming to the close of the episode anyway. So I'm going to bring this episode to a close now. Thank you very much for listening. As always, I really appreciate everybody that tunes in and listens on a weekly basis. If you're new to the podcast, then thank you for joining me and joining the community of people listening. I hope you found this episode useful on celebrating your success, but more importantly, as I've highlighted at the end of the episode, defining what success means to you and defining what a successful day means to you right now, I think are very important. And yeah, celebrate those successes. Celebrate all of the things that you do feel like you're doing well at this moment in time, because otherwise we forget those things, and yeah, it can create quite a negative mindset for us to be in. So let's finish things there. My name is Tom Regan. Thank you very much for listening, and this is the Training Tom podcast.